Hey everyone, so this video is for people who maybe missed the Teams meeting if you're virtual, but if you are virtual, you should still be attending your Teams meetings. So here are the links for those. Or if you're hybrid and you're absent because we are doing this live in class, or maybe if you were in class and you just want to review it again. But we should be doing this lesson live with our teacher. So I'm going to hit next and go to the next slide. And here we just have a properties reference sheet. This is just a slide that you can keep coming back to throughout the lesson as we're working with these 4 different properties. So we're going to be working with additive identity, additive inverse, associative property, and commutative property. We've worked a little bit already with associative and commutative property during our multiplication and division review. And then we've even worked a little bit with additive inverse for about the last week or so. Additive identity is the completely new one though. But you guys have been using this property already and you didn't even know it. It's just the property that states when you add 0, the value of the number doesn't change. So 5 plus 0 is just 5. So when you think identity, like you have your identity, numbers also have an identity. So 5's identity didn't change when we add 0. So it's the additive identity property. Additive inverse we've been working with, and that's when you have opposites. So 5 and -5. When you add them, you get 0. 3 and -3. You add them, you get 0. 100, -100. You add them, you get 0. Those are additive inverses. Associative property is when you're grouping. So if I group something together, usually we use parentheses when we group. We put it together. We say do this first. That's our order of operations. When you're adding, you can group things in different orders, whatever is going to make sense to you. If you want to group and do these 2 numbers first, or if you want to group and do these 2 numbers first, it doesn't matter with addition. Same thing with commutative property. When we're using addition, we can switch and swap the order of the numbers around. I can do 2 plus 3, and I can do 3 plus 2. The order is not going to matter. So these are our 4 properties we're going to use in our lesson, and we can come back to the slide whenever we need it. I'm going to hit next. So there are a couple of exercises. Each of them starts with an example. So here's showing all the different properties. So they started with 6 plus 15 plus -6. When you see this, something like this, you should have a light bulb because we've been doing a lot with additive inverse. You should see that if you can get that 6 and -6 together, it's 0. So in the example, they saw that, they had that light bulb, and they wanted to put that 6 and that -6 next to each other. They switched the order using the commutative property. So we're just saying we can switch the order using the commutative property. Then we wanted to say, okay, I want to do these first. I want to group these ones together. That's the associative property, putting those together. We know our additive inverse will make it 0, and then additive identity tells us that when we do 0 plus any number, that value of that number doesn't change. So 0 plus 15 is still 15. So we can use this example as a guide. So I'm going to say right now, here we have 12 plus -7 plus -12. You should be having a light bulb moment right now about that 12 and that -12 and what you want to do. So if you haven't done this one yet, pause the video and try it. Okay, so you should have tried this one. I'm going to go over it if you still need help. I like to always hit this button so it types math. It makes it kind of just look prettier than when we're just normal trying to type it in. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get that 12 and that -12 next to each other. So I need to swap that -12 and that -7. So this 12 is staying the same, but now I'm going to put the -12 next to it and then the -7. So that first step, we use commutative property and we flipped the order. So the good thing about typing math, sometimes it's hard, but I can use Control-C to copy this line and Control-V to paste it on the next line. As you get to higher and higher level math, when you were in elementary school, you worked from left to right. Now we work from top to bottom. So we show each step below the next one. So first we use commutative property to switch them. Now we're going to use associative property to group these together. So I want to put that 12 and that -12. I want you to do those first. That's what I'm showing in my work, that I'm going to do that part first. So again, the nice thing about typing math is we can copy and paste it down to the next line instead of having to rewrite everything. I know because of additive inverse, this 12 plus negative 12, this whole thing zeroes out and it goes to 0. Now I'm left with 0 plus negative 7. Additive identity property tells us when we add 0, the number stays the same. So 0 plus negative 7 is just negative 7. And when you have all that, you checked your work, you can hit share with class. On to the next exercise. So it's the same thing. We have the same example here, but now it's saying do it with negative 3 and negative 17. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are 2 light bulb moments you could be having. So the one light bulb moment you might be having is the negative 3 and negative 17, or you might have the negative 3 and the positive 3. So I'm going to say pause the video and try to do this with whichever way makes the most sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to show you the 2 ways. The first way is the way that this example is and the way we did the first exercise. So that's going to be putting those additive inverses next to each other and zeroing them out. So I'm going to start by hitting the type math button. I'm going to use my commutative property and I'm going to put that 3 next to the negative 3. So I'm going to have negative 3 plus negative 17. I'm going to copy this line down to show my next step, if it will let me. I'm going to associate this negative 3 with this 3 using parentheses. I'm grouping them together using the associative property. Now I know that negative 3 and positive 3 zeros out by additive inverse. When I add 0 plus anything, it's just that same number it was. So 0 plus negative 17 is negative 17. The other light bulb moment you might have had was, you know, that if you have 3 and 17, it's 20. That might be the easiest for you. So maybe already you just jump right into the associative property. So this is the other way you could have done this. So say you wanted to just group that together so that you have negative 20. That's going to be easiest for you, then that's fine. Sometimes instead of getting additive inverses together, it's easier for us to get all of our negatives together and all of our positives together. So for this one, I'm grouping that negative 3 plus negative 17 because I saw that that's going to be negative 20. My next line, I'm going to replace negative 3 plus negative 17 with negative 20. Now we have negative 20 plus 3. We can use our rules for adding from the previous lesson, where we know when we have things with different signs, we can subtract their absolute values. 20 minus 3 will give us 17. To figure out if it's positive or negative, 20 is bigger than 3, and this 20 is negative, so our answer is negative. And that's what we did in our last class. So if you still need help with that, I would go and review the materials and your notes from last class. Either way we did this, we got the answer of negative 17. So whichever way you did it is perfectly fine, but those are the 2 kind of light bulb moments you might have seen in doing this. When you're done with either one of these, you don't have to type both, hit share with class. On to the next exercise. Now we have one where they're breaking it apart in order to get the additive inverse. So here they split up 25 into 10 and 15. So you have that positive 10 with that negative 10 to zero out, but then we had to use some properties to put it together. So this is just showing you the steps if you did not know how to use the rules. If you remember the rules from last lesson, you don't need to go through all of these steps. These steps are if you don't understand how the rules work. This is what they're showing you how you can do it. If you know that when you have numbers with different signs, you subtract them. So you would end up doing 22 minus 17. If you do 22 minus 17, you get 5. Now you need to look at which number has the bigger absolute value. 22 is more than 17, and this 22 is negative. So our answer is negative. You don't have to show all of these steps if you're already getting good at that rule. This next slide is for you to put these in order. So I'm going to tell you that the first one is going to start with the card that looks exactly like this. So I'm going to find the card that looks exactly like that and put it at the top. and the last one is -6. So now you need to put these remaining 4 cards in the correct order. So if you haven't done it yet, pause the video and put these cards in order. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the order to put them in. You can work top to bottom or bottom to top. I'm going to work top to bottom. So when I see this and I look at the other steps, I'm noticing they're putting all the negatives together and the positives together. So actually this card that I already have here works. They're using the commutative property to swap the 6 and the -22. So it says down here what properties. I'm going to say commutative property to swap 6 and -22. Just kind of keeping my notes. Now we want the negatives and the positives together. I see this one has a bunch of parentheses. That's the associative property. So the associative property to group negatives and positives. So here we grouped -18 with -22, and then we grouped 6 with 28. Now I just got these 2 cards left. I'm going to go, this one shows adding the negatives first, and they didn't change the positives. This one shows the addition of the positives. So now this is completely in order. We ordered these cards, we wrote our properties, we can hit share with class. The next activity is a card sort. So I'm going to move all these examples down and all the properties up at the top so it's easy for me to see. So here we have our 4 properties we've been working with, and then we have these different examples. So if I see this one, 13 plus 0 is 13, that's additive identity. To match them, you just hover over it until you get that blue outline, and then you let go, and it actually will put them in a group together. So pause the video and complete this card sort. Okay, you should have completed the card sort by now, so I'm going to go through with you how to do it. So additive identity is the one where you add 0 and it doesn't change. So I'm looking for another card where they're adding 0. Here is another card where they add 0. So I'm just going to put it over till it highlights blue and let go. Next, another easy one I think is additive inverse. Additive inverse is opposite numbers that add to equal 0. So I think that's going to be another easy card to find. Here I have 5 and -5 equals 0. That is additive inverse. And here we have -17 plus 17 is 0. So now we have commutative property and associative property. Associative property is the one where you're using parentheses to group things and change the order. So if I look, these have parentheses, but it's just to keep it kind of neat and tidy with the negatives. These 2 have parentheses. This one first puts the 2 and the 5 together, and this one puts the 5 and the 5 together. So changing which grouping is the associative property. Same thing, this one had 3 and 8, then they changed it to the 7 and 3 grouped. That should be a plus. Miss Martin must have had a typo when she made this. That's the associative property. So these 2 must be the commutative property, and they are. So commutative property is just swapping the order. 5 plus -4 is the same as -4 plus 5. -9 plus 12 is the same as 12 plus -9. Now that we're done with the card sort, you have work to do in your class notebook. So it's Unit 2, page 4 to complete the remaining activities. And if you want to look, page 9 just has our glossary, so it has some more vocabulary work.